Welcome back to Following Noadon, a Stormlight podcast. This week, we have some interludes to go through, and we have a special guest joining us. We have Tim, who is a big Cosmere fan. He has read plenty of the Cosmere and is here to help us try to explain some of these interludes. Paul, what are your 2 words for these interludes and these 2 chapters we're about to do?
Okay, so my 2 words for these chapters are ruthless and hidden.
Ruthless and hidden. Elliot, what are your 2 words?
So my 2 words this time are scholarship and odd.
Scholarship, odd, ruthless, and hidden. All right, let's discuss these. All right. Tim, would you like to introduce yourself and we can talk about Paul's words first?
Yeah, my name's Tim, study IT, college kid. Been into the Stormlight archive and specifically the Way of Kings since it was the only book out. So I've been able to follow the progress, and I've read all the Cosmere books in the meantime.
Was Way of Kings the first Cosmere book you read, or did you read Elantris before that?
It was either Mistborn or the Way of Kings.
Okay. Okay.
But I think it was the Way of Kings.
And you referred me to the Way of Kings and I started reading it, but it wasn't actually because of your reference to the Way of Kings. I just picked up the Way of Kings of my own volition, and then halfway through it, I saw the name Dalinar Kholin, and I was like, "Wait a minute, is this that book that Tim was talking about?" And here we are.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at telling people about things, but not as good at convincing them to actually read them.
It's all right. We ended up here one way or the other.
We got there eventually.
We did.
Yeah.
I can say it's definitely nice to have 2 people here who know what they're talking about. So
Yeah, exactly. All right.
this one.
Paul, you want to explain your 2 words for us?
So my 2 words were ruthless and hidden.
Okay.
And I chose these words. I chose ruthless partly because of the interludes. We learned about what was his name, Axes, and he seems like a pretty interesting character, as well as we'll talk about Zeth's new owner later. Seems pretty ruthless, and I'm interested to talk more about that. But those were, I guess, some of the main reasons I chose ruthless. And hidden was largely for Shallan's intentions and how she's trying to keep that hidden.
Okay.
As well as Kaladin's new technique to try and keep his bridge crew hidden from harm. So that was the main reason I chose those words.
Okay. Elliot, what were your 2 words and what do they mean?
My 2 words were scholarship and odd. And I too keyed in on the Axes chapter. I think that might be my favorite chapter of this section. But I tied Axes to Shallan. Instead, they both made some comments in these chapters about scholarship. Axes had a kind of funny line about the things I do for scholarship, kind of referencing all this pain and frustration and ridiculous things that apparently happen to him frequently, all in the name of cataloging all the spren, which I thought was a cool pursuit. And then Shallan learns about what it means to study and get into the world of scholarship, and she has a discussion with Yasna about either learning or listening to the author that you're reading versus imposing your own thoughts on the topic, and they have a cool conversation about that. And then odd, primarily for the first interlude chapter with, is the character's name Risen or Risen?
Risen is how they say it.
Risen? Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like 2 syllables, like Risen is how they say it.
Okay. The Thalen names definitely throw me. They sound odd, but Risen. Okay. In the Risen chapter, she learns kind of a little lesson about just because something is odd doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different from you. And she learns a little bit of a lesson about you can learn from things that are odd. And I thought that was a cool concept. So odd.
Cool. All right. Well, before we go any further with those, let us get into our spell check for this week. So
Oh no.
I'm gonna
our
ace it.
our first spell check is the ocean sprint. Well, it's not officially an ocean sprint. It's a sprint that comes out of the ocean in Interlude 5. And Elliot, how would you like to say this name?
I had a feeling you might pick this name, but because I struggled with it, I had to read it a couple times when I came across it for the first time. But I'm gonna pronounce it as Kusakesh.
Okay.
I'm grimacing. Kusakesh.
Kusakesh. All right. Paul, how do they say it in the audiobook?
Kusakesh.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yes.
said.
Nice. Good
That was
job,
pretty
Andrew.
spot on.
All right. Paul, I'm looking forward to this one. How'd you like to spell it?
Elliot did such a good job, and I'm here to mess up this.
You're gonna nail it.
All right, so my best guess for Kusakesh is Kusakesh.
Ooh. Almost.
Okay.
It's actually
I always feel very off. So
you were very close that time. This was a tough one, but the way it's actually spelled is Kusicesh.
C. Okay. So
Yep.
an IC instead of an AK. I see.
Yep. Yep.
Not terrible. Not terrible. Good job, guys. Our second one is Non-Balot's Betrothed. Non-Balot is Shallan's brother, and Non-Balot's Betrothed is writing to Shallan via Spanreed. How would you like to say her name, Elliot?
Elita?
Okay.
Am I close?
You're close. It's not 100%, but Paul, how do they say it in the audiobook?
Okay. As far as I remember, it's Elita
Elita.
in the audiobook. I could be slightly wrong because I specifically remember writing down my guess as not exactly how I thought it would sound. So
So in the
you might
audiobook, they say Elita
Elita. Okay.
with a
Elita.
Now I'm very much second guessing. So I'm just gonna full send with what I had.
Go for it.
You
I was
got it.
confidence.
I was going off of the close to palindrome, like we talked before. So I had ELITE, literally the word elite, I believe, but that was my best guess.
You're not terrible. Like it's not way off. It's EYLITA. Elita.
The palindrome idea threw you off.
The
time.
palindrome was leading you astray.
This one is
there.
not.
True.
Must mean she's not. Must mean she's not a holy person of the Vorin Church.
Something to dig into there. Yeah, it's never steered me wrong before with the palindrome thing, and now it's coming back to bite me.
I would encourage you to stay on the palindrome thing, because 9 times out of 10 it's going to help you as opposed to hurt you.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to stick with it.
All right, and our last one is the King of Carbranth. And Elliot, how would you like to say this name?
A lot of letters in this one, but I'm moderately confident. I'm saying Teravangian.
Okay.
Teravangian.
Great, well done. That's
Yeah.
how I would say it.
Yeah.
Teravangian.
Sweet.
Yeah, and for spelling it, my best go at it is TerraVangean.
I can see
Sounds
where you
like
got that
I'm
from.
really afraid it's going to be a GIAN at the end, but I had to pick one.
I don't have it in front of me. Someone want to spell it for him?
Yeah, I got it. You should have gone with your other thought at the end there. The name is TARAVANGIAN.
Okay.
A lot of A's.
Not my best week,
A lot
but
of A's. Not your worst
Yep.
week either. You've had worse.
Yeah.
It's all right.
It's
True.
okay. You still have the glory of Numu Huku Maki whatever
Alunomor.
to
Yeah.
hang your hat on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't accurate on it all the way, but it was closer than anticipated, so I'm proud.
All
I wore
right.
that
Good.
medal well.
Good job, gentlemen. All right, let's dive in to Interlude 4. And Tim, I want to get your input here. Talk to me about Shinovar. We see a little bit about Shinovar in this chapter, and they kind of introduce it with some ironic descriptions as opposed to what we on Earth know of nature. And Risen is describing Shinovar in a very odd way. Talk to me about Shinovar.
Yeah, so Shinovar, it's very different from the rest of Roshar. Completely different. It's not ruled by the high storms, as they say in the book, because the mountains break up the high storms, and so you're able to have a more Earth-like ecosystem. And so there's soil, there's what we would consider normal plants, not like underwater plants.
Right.
And so it's basically a little slice of Earth on Roshar.
Risen describes it as dead. She walks out of her little cart carriage or whatever she's riding in, and she describes the atmosphere as dead, which is funny to me because Elliot, you put this in the outline that we would describe most of Roshar as looking dead because it's a bunch of rock, it's a bunch of underwater plants that they're not green as we would equate life to is the normal color for us. But when she sees this green grass with springy dirt soil and she's all disgusted by it, she's like, it doesn't move. Why doesn't it move?
Yeah, I had a little ironic chuckle when I read that because she was almost describing Shinovar the way I feel about the rest of Roshar, the way it gets described of this is so weird. And then she's describing all these things that you and I are very familiar with, thinking this is so weird. It was a funny little flipped perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest thing for her was the lack of spren. And so there's no spren anywhere in Shinovar.
I noticed that really that gets me scratching my head. I'm really wondering why. What is it about Shinovar that makes there be no spren? I don't think we've seen anything so far to suggest that there's any reason for spren not to show up everywhere. Everyone's familiar with them. They're so commonplace in the rest of Roshar. No one blinks an eye when they get surrounded by pain spren or flame spren or wind spren, and then here in Shinovar there are none. Like, why? Gonna have to chalk that one up on my questions for later.
It's not only Shinovar as well. So later on in Interlude 5, Axius notes that he hasn't seen a single flame spren in the entirety of wherever he is. I don't remember.
He's in
Eerie?
Okay, yeah, right. And which is next to Shinovar. And he just notes that he's looking for these specific type of spren that don't appear in the rest of Roshar. That's why he's there. But flame spren, he hasn't seen a single one, and it's one of the most common types of spren. So spren are behaving differently depending on where on Roshar you are.
The way I remember reading it was that they can be finicky and they may show up at certain times and may not. But I don't remember him specifically saying that he hadn't seen one in Eerie. Do you, Elliot and Paul, remember that?
I think he made some kind of mention of that.
Okay.
I specifically just remember about his character in that he was there to look for these kind of weird different spren. Like he talked, I couldn't tell if it was a joke or not, honestly, about like spren you could only see if you're intoxicated and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, definitely I guess shows that it's a very different environment there, and that there's still a lot that even the people who live in Roshar don't know about spren as well.
Mhm.
Right.
So back in Shinovar,
Mhm.
in Interlude 4, I noticed a couple other things in this chapter, specifically about the Shin themselves, and we learned a little bit about the Oath Stone that we know Zeth carries one. We've kind of seen how it works, where whoever holds his Oath Stone gets to command him to do whatever they want. And he has to do it. We learn in this chapter that at least my takeaway. Somebody, Tim or Trevor, you guys can correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but the understanding that I got out of Interlude 4 was that the Shin believe that if anyone picks up a weapon, they become a warrior and are then instantly bound to an oath stone, almost like it's a punishment, almost it seems like. Is that the way that works?
Yes. I'm not sure if the oath stone is specifically for truthless or whether it's for all warriors. But if you pick up a weapon, then you become a warrior, and
Interesting.
you're demoted to the lowest level of society.
Yeah.
I did think it was super interesting in Shinovar learning how, what was it, like the farmers, right, were like the high people in charge that
The
everyone looked
royalty.
up to. Yes, the the top dogs. And I thought that was really interesting how we know that it's different geographically and that it's not affected by high storms and such like the rest of the world. But not only that, it's literally just like, feels like the inverse of the rest of the world. It's not affected by the high storms, and the whole like hierarchy and stuff is just toppled from compared to the rest of Roshar.
Juxtapose it with Alethi culture, whereas all of the Bright Lords are carrying shard blades, and if you don't have a shard blade, you're kind of on the outskirts of society. That's why Sadius is so irked that he doesn't have a shard blade. He has shard plate, but he doesn't have a shard blade, and he really wants one. Whereas the Shin would be like, that would be the worst thing ever, and that's how Zeth views himself as. He literally views himself as one of the worst people ever.
And I think something that's also interesting to point out is geographical locations as well. They're so different as a culture, and then they are also the opposite ends of what is Roshar.
Right.
Yeah, that would definitely explain a little bit, at least, of why they're so different. They do. It does sound like Shinovar is very isolated from the rest of Roshar. I'm getting the impression that not many people have ever been to Shinovar, and that it's a pretty foreign world, which would explain the differences in cultures and beliefs. But there were other parts of it too that seemed extremely different. There was the negotiation between the Thalen merchant trader that Risen is like apprenticed to, and then the Shin leader, and they almost negotiate the opposite way of how you think a negotiation should go. Instead of talking up the value of their goods, they're talking down the value of their goods, and we get kind of the explanation that the Shin value honesty and humility so much that it turns things on its head. And it was a very interesting difference that's completely opposite of, like you said, what you'd see elsewhere.
Right. So something I want to bring to your guys' attention while we're talking about geography here is this map I have put for you guys. If you could open that up. So I did a little bit of research because I was genuinely curious myself. The map that you have behind you, Elliot, does not have a key of length or distance or anything. There's no size comparison. But on the Wikipedia, what the Wikipedia says is that map in front of you, Elliot, is 40 million square kilometers. And I don't know about you, but that doesn't mean anything to me. So I did a little bit of research, and so basically what that means is it's 4,000 kilometers high and 10,000 kilometers across. For reference, and I will put this on screen for you guys now, a direct line around the surface of the Earth from Vancouver, Canada, to Moscow, Russia, is 8,194 kilometers. And so the map behind you, Elliot, is slightly larger than that, about 20% larger than that, I guess. And that gives you some perspective as to how big Roshar is. This picture that I've put up for you guys, I photoshopped myself. Thank you very much. And it is
Fancy.
It's pretty, as far as I could tell, it's pretty accurate to how big Roshar is compared to our map. Also, something to remember is Roshar is in the southern hemisphere. So you'll see on the south side of Roshar, there's the Frostlands, which is underneath the Shattered Plains. That is the cold part of Roshar. And as most of the human race on Earth lives in the northern hemisphere, that's kind of counterintuitive for us, but Roshar's in the southern hemisphere.
Nice.
That's good to know.
Yep. I have one more tidbit if you would like. So, the Shattered Plains, I've always wondered how big exactly were the Shattered Plains. And I did some very imprecise measurements with my computer, but this is what I came to. The Shattered Plains, as viewed on that map behind you, are 727 kilometers across and 400 kilometers high, which turns into 451 miles by 248. And for reference, Kansas is 410 miles across by 213 miles high.
So yeah, so they're in Kansas. I got it. I
Yep.
got the mental
That-
picture.
That's my
Honestly-
takeaway for tonight as well. Shattered Plains is Kansas.
Equals
Kansas.
Kansas.
Yep.
Okay.
Middle of nowhere.
Kansas. So we know. Yeah, we know nothing. I think the Shattered Plains might be a little more eventful, but that's so one thing, I don't know if I'm skipping too far ahead, but I am really wanting to talk about Zeth. We've mentioned before how, I mean, Zeth is super cool and he's kind of like mysterious at the moment. We know he has all these powers. We don't know why, and we don't know why he's so bound to this oath stone. I think it was interesting that you brought up about when you pick up a weapon, you're bound to almost like a curse, and that comparison between that and the oath stone is really interesting, and I've never thought about that. But I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts, as well as, is there any form of like justice system in this world? Because I feel like Zeth is like just sicked onto people over and over and kind of like used as a tool to kill people, but there seems to be no kind of repercussion for him or his owner, and so I was kind of curious about that.
Tim, I'll let you answer this here in a second, but if you all would refer to your map, which each of you have, and I will put on screen for you guys again, the Bavlands, which is where Zeth is on the southern tip of Yakaved, backed up to a mountain range, and I always think of it as the Wild West of Yakaved. It's where the High Prince of Yakaved doesn't go. He kind of just lets them do their thing. As long as they're exporting minerals to gain wealth, that's all he cares about. And that's kind of where the crime boss of Yakaved lives. That's how I interpret it.
That makes more sense. I was really confused because it seemed like just people just kept getting killed, and I didn't even think about it at first, and later on I was like, wait, can you do that? Like, is that okay? Or is like there any form of justice system for that, or what? But that's interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good explanation for what it is. All the different kingdoms, Althkar, Yakaved, Herdaz, Bavland, they all have their own, unique ways of government, and unique laws and whatnot. And as the ones that are closer together tend to have more similar laws. But yeah, that area is definitely more of a no man's land, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. So what we know, I guess, about Zeth right now is that there's someone out there who knows what he's capable of, knows what he's done, and has now basically taken control of him. And so I'm really scared to see what's going to happen because I had so much hope in my heart for Zeth and that he would I don't know. He could, his whole story that we've learned so far is that he wants to not be used for killing, and he kind of just wants to have a more simple life as he can, even going into being a slave, like we've seen. Um,
We got some bits in this chapter that definitely expanded my compassion for Zeth a little bit. He specifically mentioned how when he gets sent on these assassination missions, he very intentionally doesn't kill more than he has to, and he really tries as hard as he can to uphold his honor and be the better person that he wishes he was. But we still don't know why he became truthless. I don't think. Did we didn't really get any hints about that, right? So I think the going back to our discussion, episodes ago about how we feel about Zeth, I still am withholding judgment a little bit because I want to know how he got himself into this scenario, but I do at least admire the fact that he's trying to make the best of his situation. But like you just said, Paul, that situation sounds like it's about to get a lot worse.
Yeah. I want to highlight Zeth's mental state at the moment. The entire time since he's assassinated Gavilar, he wants to be nobody. He wants to be forgotten in some small town, used to clean out the petri dish or whatever of Roshar, and doesn't want to kill anybody, but he will because of his Oathstone. And at the end of this chapter, somebody who knows his full potential and knows exactly who he is, he's the one who killed Gavilar, and this new person who hired him knows exactly that. And they're prepared to use him, so he's not happy.
so I have I was about to say minor prediction, but it's pretty bold about where Zeth is going to go. I think this is really out of left field. I think somehow. So as far as we know, Zeth's new owner is like kind of intending to use him to like kill major people in Roshar, like Light Eyes, higher ups and such. I think in some way, somehow in the future, I think that Zeth is gonna like this owner is gonna find out about Kaladin in some way, and at some point, Zeth is gonna have to assassinate Kaladin, and then there's gonna be either some kind of dialogue or fight or something, and it's gonna end up being he's somehow gonna get his Oathstone or something like that. He's gonna intertwine with Kaladin. I think that's my prediction. Long story short, somehow I could be totally off, but that's where I honestly want to see it go. That's what I'm hoping for. I think that would be really cool. That he's about to kill or something, and Kaladin talks to him and learns, and it's like, oh, I can help you or something, and then we'll work something out. That's what I want to see. That's my hope, but I don't know if that will happen.
I could almost see the climax of the book being like a showdown between Kaladin and Zeth. That would be pretty epic to pull the two storylines together. But that is definitely a bold prediction, Paul. That would be cool. That would be very cool if that's where this is going.
I would say right now it's more of a I hope this happens than a prediction that I can educatedly say will happen. But Kaladin seems to stir up trouble everywhere he goes, so maybe he'll get on the owner's bad side somehow, and they'll run into each other. So I'd really love to see that. That's what I'm rooting for at the moment.
Good prediction. The entire time we mentioned my poker face before we went live tonight, and the entire time I was watching Tim to see if he reacted to any of that. So that was fun for me at least.
Yeah, I was doing great, and then I saw Elliot intently staring at me. It was hilarious. Elliot.
I was intrigued.
Yeah.
You guys are good about the no spoilers. I'm very impressed. Good poker faces.
I always try and glance, but I haven't given anything away. So.
All right. Any closing thoughts on our interludes?
Just one thing I did want to mention before we move on. In the Zeth chapter, in Interlude 6, we learned a little bit in there about Surgebinders, which Surgebinder has been on my list of things I wanted to learn more about. And we get a brief mention where Zeth talks about that. And he talks about Surgebinder in reference to his ability to absorb the Stormlight and then use it to perform supernatural acts and things like that. So it wasn't completely like spelled out, but I think from the context I can pretty strongly conclude that Surgebinder is equal to those that can wield that power of the Stormlight, which I think is awesome. And he had a really cool description mentioned in there about how it makes him glow when he absorbs all the Stormlight, and it kind of is counteractive to his stealth in the night. You know, it's hard to be stealthy when you're glowing with Stormlight, but he mentioned how Surge Binders used to be or were intended to be warriors of light who battle against the dark, not those who sneak around in the dark. And I thought that was really a cool concept, that Zeth really is being forced to misuse this power that he somehow has that we don't know how he has. But I liked getting this little bit about Surge Binders. That was a really cool tidbit.
There's a quick quote that I'll read, which gives Zeth more humanity than I think we've seen so far, and his new master has killed his old master, and he's confronting him about who Zeth actually is, and he says, "Were you not meant for greatness, Zeth?" And Zeth replies, "There is no greatness in killing. You speak like a kukuri. Great men create food and clothing. He who adds is to be revered. I am he who takes away. At least in the killing of men such as these, I can pretend to be doing a service." He's degraded himself in his own mind to the point where he doesn't even want to be referred to as his father's son. He's so ashamed of himself that he wants to be tied to his grandfather. That's why he calls himself Zeth son Valano instead of Zeth son Naturo. And he's beaten himself down so much to the point where he does not consider himself human anymore.
Yeah, it was big.
Nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other question that I have about the interlude chapters is kind of backtracking a little bit about Axes. And we see that Axes, it has a lot of weird characteristics, I guess. And I believe he's described, or he's an Amian,
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Aamian is how they say it.
Okay. I was kind of curious if I could get any explanation about what he is, I guess.
Yeah, I can give you a little bit of what we know so far, and then even probably a little beyond that. It's fine. So he's a Amian, or did you say Amian?
Aamian is how they say it in the book, or in the audiobook.
Okay. Yeah, and he's specifically a Saya or Sia Amian. And so they're from the far western side of Roshar, a small island. And all we really know so far is that they're not really very common anymore. What I can tell you is that they're functionally immortal. So unless they're killed, they'll live forever essentially. And then they've got some particular things like they can change the color of their skin. So like he can make tattoos on his body, keep notes, as well as his shadow pointing the wrong way, which keep that in mind. And before the end of the book, that'll teach you a little bit more about who the Aamians are.
I'm really intrigued because they have a lot of kind of obscure talents that like the tattoos thing seems really useful. He keeps notes on them, but like the shadow thing doesn't seem like like cool party trick, I guess. I don't um but yeah, I'm really curious to figure out more about Axes. And
I am too. I was very intrigued. I highlight in my book whenever I find anything I have questions on. I've got a yellow highlighter, and there were like entire pages in this chapter that I just highlighted the whole thing because
I
I was
was
like, I want to know more about all of
I
this.
was going to ask,
There's so much in here.
is the entire Interlude 5 just highlighted yellow right now?
Basically, yep.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing I pulled out of there was that whole shadow thing going the wrong way. That one, that defies all the laws of physics and science. So this dude's got something up, and I want to know what it is.
All right. I think we can conclude our
Sorry.
segment on. Go ahead.
I had one last thing, just a fun fact about the Shin and then the rest of people of Roshar is their eyes are constantly they're said they're more round, a little bit larger, slightly off. And just a fun fact is that the rest of Roshar, their eyes are like people who are from Asia. They have a slight tilt to it. And the Shinovar, the Shin, they have more European type rounder eyes.
interesting.
The racial differences between all the different groups has definitely been interesting. We've gotten a few other little bits and pieces about other races as well. They have different defining aspects, and I did notice that one about the Shin. So it seems like each one of them kind of has a slight little difference that notes them as that race.
Yeah, Shallan was spotted as from Yakaved the second she landed in Carbranth. So there's some very specific racial traits in Roshar.
Speaking of Shallan, we probably should move on to her chapter, right?
Let's do it. So we haven't heard from Shallan since part 1, and when part 3 starts, we immediately jump in with her. And Elliot, you've got some stuff at the beginning of this Shallan chapter. Do you want to start it?
Yes. So I've got some questions about Shallan's past. There's been a few hints that make me really curious and wonder if there's something a bit darker in her past than we've really learned yet. She kind of comes off as this very innocent and good person, but there's been just little hints about maybe something darker in the past, and we got more of those in this chapter. When she's talking about her family, she uses phrases like "can't be blamed" and "they all bore scars," almost like she's trying to excuse something that's happened, or say it's almost like it would be in the context of we're all messed up, but we can't really be blamed for that based on what happened. We just don't know what happened they might be blamed for, or what she's trying to use as the excuse of us. We don't get any of that context, but I really want to know. But it's reinforcing my fear actually that there's something dark in Shallan's past.
There's, yeah, everything we've learned so far is not all as well, because her brother, when we met her in the last interlude, was pulling legs off a crab, and her family, as she's been reading them, they're all very concerned about her safety, as they should be, but her safety and her success and that type of thing, they're very dependent on her succeeding. So
there was even another bit in this chapter that tied it in for me as well, when she sketches the king of Carbranth, Taravangian. Is that what we decided his name was?
Yep.
When she sketches him, she subconsciously draws these like dark, twisted figures in the background, and she even mentions in the chapter that was something like trying to get out. I've actually got the section here. I'll read it real quick. She's talking about the sketch she just did. Shallan looked down at the ruined sketch. The creatures were simply her fancy, the product of letting her mind wander. That was all. Just imagination. Perhaps there was something in her subconscious that she needed to express. But what could the figures mean then? That just gives me even more like creepy crawlies about, so there's something weird going on here, and it's starting to poke out a little bit in her subconscious. But that was a weird little section for her.
I think it's really fascinating that her whole family seems to just not be blatantly dark, but just do dark or odd things secondhand or like unconsciously. Like we in the old interlude about Nambala, it was very uncomfortable, where we just get this image of him picking legs off a crab.
It's like they can't help it.
Yeah, it's just like a tendency almost, and it makes me really worried and
Yeah.
very uncomfortable all the time.
Well, yeah, I definitely think it's really interesting, her family and that dynamic. And you know what we know so far is one of her brothers likes to pull the legs off of crabs, and one of her brothers had a gambling addiction, and just makes you wonder, you know, what's up with the rest of her family and what's up with her.
We've always seen that Shallan is almost seems like the exemplary child of the bunch, because she's incredibly smart and intuitive and an amazing like artist. And now I didn't really think about it, but now that Elliot has brought it up, it makes me wonder, like, does she have a thing? Like, does she have a weird dark tendency or something? And it makes me really curious. So yeah, throughout this chapter, she's been still working to try and steal the soul caster from Yasna, and we know that she's been getting more and more trust from Yasna as she's done her wardship, and so we'll see how that works out. There's kind of I do like these chapters a lot more. I was not a very big fan of the original Shallan chapters, um, but now that there's kind of this looming, ooh, when is she gonna try and grab this and run off, or will she? Because it seems like she wants to do it for her family, but there seems to be an internal conflict still um, about actually doing it.
She wants to help her family, but she is not looking forward to returning to her family. She is having the time of her life studying in Kharbranth and flirting with Ardents and stuff, and she is not looking forward to going back to her father's old estate.
I think she truly is enjoying the scholarship of it. That was one of my words for this section. You can tell that she's really getting into just this learning and history, and she has a mind and a desire for that. And you can see that she hasn't gotten that in her childhood, her upbringing. She just didn't have exposure to as much wealth and wealth of knowledge that's out there. And here she is now in the Palindrome with Yasna, a renowned scholar to guide her, and a huge unlimited basically library at her disposal, and she's in heaven. It's where she dreams of being, basically, is kind of how I'm getting it. But then she keeps remembering, oh yeah, I'm here to steal the fabric, the soul caster, and take it back to save my family. There's definitely a conflict going on inside her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and her family's not even aware. Like, they're all just concerned that she's just, you know, completely overwhelmed, not realizing that she loves it.
Yep. There was a funny bit in this chapter where Shallan and Yasna are talking, and Yasna's kind of chiding her on her sharp tongue and how she always has a snappy remark that's not always the most polite. And she makes kind of an offhand comment that, like, you know, you, Shallan, you and Wit would get along really well. And I thought that was hilarious, because they totally would. Wit is just, his job is to sit around and insult people, as we've seen. And that's Shallan's favorite thing to do, is to come up with witty insults and jokes about everyone. They would work well together, I think.
That's true. I think it would be really funny to see a conversation later on between Shallan and Wit. But I'll be completely honest, I would 100% understand if Brandon Sanderson tries to avoid that, because I think that would be a very high stakes, high expectation conversation, and that would probably be so difficult to write. Like, his writing is outstanding, but that's got to be a really difficult conversation to. It's just witty remark after witty remark on multiple levels, even. So
a wit battle.
yeah, truly a battle of wits.
Before we move on to this next Kaladin chapter and wrap up the episode, I do want to read a quote from this Shallan chapter. It's about Yasna, actually. So Shallan and Yasna are talking about Taravangian, and as he's left, and they're discussing how Taravangian is slow of wit, is how Shallan puts it. Not the quickest mind in the Palindrome is how she puts it, and Shallan starts the conversation. The Light Eyes here say he's weak, Shallan said, because he panders to so many other monarchs, because he fears war, because he doesn't have a shard blade. Yasna didn't reply, though she looked disturbed. Brightness? Shallan prodded, walking to her own seat and arranging her charcoals. In ancient days, Yasna said, a man who brought peace to his kingdom was considered to be of great worth. Now that same man would be derided as a coward. She shook her head. It has been centuries coming, this change. It should terrify us. We could do with more men like Taravangian, and I shall require you to never call him dull again, not even in passing. With all the research Shallan has done about whatever she's researching, old kings or stuff like that, and the Voidbringers and whatever else we've gotten tidbits of so far, she has come to the conclusion that it's been a long time coming of Alethi culture specifically losing their taste for peace. Shallan, who's from Yakaved, but the Vorin culture in general, the Vorin religion and the Vorin culture, now see peace as weakness. And the more you conquer, the more gemstones you capture, that is honorable to the Vorin culture now, as opposed to maintaining a peace. And Yasna grimaces at this and says, that's not how it used to be. That's not how I see it.
It sounds like Yasna's been reading Way of Kings as well. It's some of the similar thoughts that Dalinar is wrestling with about leadership and flipping the Alethi norm on its head. She's not quite maybe having the same thoughts and discussions as Dalinar, but similar vein.
Right. Any closing thoughts on the Shallan chapter?
Not really. I'm excited to see when or if Shallan ends up stealing the Soulcaster. I always forget that. But I'm curious to see. That's kind of the overlying issue at head, and I'm really curious to see in the further Shallan chapters where that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Alrighty. Coming into chapter 30, we meet back up with Kaladin. Since part 2, he finally had Bridge 4 under his belt. And going into chapter 30, he walks out of the barracks and they all follow him. And that's how we enter this chapter. Gaz and Lamoral? Is that his?
Lamoral?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lamoral?
Lamoral? Yeah, Lamoral. That's how you say it. Have a conversation about the Bridgemen that finally brings to the reader an answer as to what the Bridgemen are. The readers basically figured it out by now, but it's someone in world has finally confirmed it, that the Bridgemen are bait. They are there to die, and that is their purpose. It's so that better men in the Light Eye's eyes survive and lesser men die. That is their purpose in this army. And they haven't revealed that to the Bridgemen, obviously, because that would, crush them, but it's finally revealed to the reader that that's exactly what's happening here.
So we also see Gaz furthermore using this bait to try and find a way to get back at Kaladin without outright killing him or doing something like that. He's been looking for a way to get rid of Kaladin because Kaladin causes him a lot of trouble. He's really breaking the norm of the broken spirited Bridgemen. And so Gaz kind of encourages Kaladin to experiment and try new things, thinking that it's not going to work out and he's just going to die. So,
Gaz is a little bit conflicted though, because he likes the fact that he's getting a consistent source of cash from Kaladin's bribes, and he talks about having to pay Lamaril, and he mentions, I think at the very end, something about blackmail, but I did not understand what all that was about. Maybe we don't know yet, but I didn't understand why Gaz owes Lamaril. But Gaz Gaz is definitely conflicted here, and I found it interesting that part of this chapter was from Gaz's perspective, which was new. Gaz's mind was a slightly dark place. Don't know where I want to go back there again, but that was interesting change.
Yeah, definitely. A dark place, missing an eye.
Yes.
Yes.
mm-hmm.
And towards the first half of the chapter, Gaz is fully prepared and willing to get rid of Kaladin in a not so subtle way. And Lamaril says no, he needs to fall on the field. He needs to not die a martyr, because if you make a martyr of him, that is going to be worse. We're going to be in a worse situation than we are now. And Gaz says, okay, fine, I'll figure something out. And then when they start experimenting with the side carry that Kaladin's trying, Gaz says, yeah, you should try a plateau run with that. And Kaladin gets a little suspicious.
So my initial prediction on what's going to happen with Kaladin, whenever I was reading that, Kaladin, maybe he's starting to kind of doubt this whole side carry thing, this new technique. Maybe he's fully confident in it. But I'm really afraid that he won't die, but like maybe his crew will die because of this, and he'll feel a really immense amount of shame that he like led his bridge crew to their death or something by trying something new. And I don't think Kaladin will die because of his new technique, but something bad will come, and I think he's gonna feel really beat up about it. That's my guess.
He's a main character. He can't die yet, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's got plot armor, right? Yeah.
Got another 500 pages to go. He can't die.
Yeah, exactly. he won't die yet, right?
Kaladin did one thing in this chapter that I really liked. There was a little bit where we learned that he kind of set up some squad leaders, for lack of a better term, amongst his crew, kind of some level below him leaders that are kind of organizing the 30-ish men, I think, that they have. And we learned that he made Moash one of the squad leaders, which Moash was one of his biggest opponents earlier on, and one of the, I think, later ones to really join his cause. And Moash even comments on this, or there's a discussion in, I think, on the chapter of, why'd you make me squad leader if you don't like me? And Kaladin, kind of mentions, you stood up to me, you showed some initiative, and I like that. I need that. And that's a really humble thing for Kaladin to do, is realize that even if I don't like this guy, he can still be a good leader in my group. And that was admirable. I like that.
Yeah, Kaladin is doing everything he can to get normalcy for his bridge crew. He's trying to get them to respect themselves and view themselves as soldiers, because that's how he views them. So if they view themselves as soldiers, they might respect themselves more and be willing to get in shape and not be depressed all the time, that type of thing.
Yep.
Look at him go.
Look at him go.
Honestly, how far can he go?
Alrighty. Any closing thoughts for this section, gentlemen?
My last note was my, I guess, prediction that side carry will not work, and that it's gonna get him nowhere. I don't know. I think it's not gonna work out perfectly. That's my only guess. But who knows?
Guess we got to read on to find out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, Tim, for this episode. It was nice to have you on for some more insight on these interlude chapters, and otherwise, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, guys. Till next week.
Adios.
Sayonara.
Cheerio.